Can we talk about relationships real quick?
Okay. All right, bring it up. Yeah, go for it.
So I am in an interracial marriage, and um everything was felt perfect, you know. First year and a half, then we got married, and I we went on a trip. We went on a trip to Sydney, and we had been drinking. It was Pride in Sydney, gay pride, and we were gonna get a cab to go to another venue. And I kept trying to get a cab, and none of the cabs would take us. Um, Now, in my mind, I'm thinking, I know why they're not taking us. We're not going far. It's there's hundreds of thousands of people uh in the city, you know, they're being picky. Now, did at first my race come into my mind? That's maybe why they weren't picking us up. Absolutely. But why wouldn't it? Everywhere I go in the world, I've experienced some kind of implicit bias or some kinds of direct racism or um, stereotyping or whatever you want to call them. And so at that point, I went to my husband and I said, "Hey, um, I said you get us a cab. Like I'm over it." And he just looked at me in the eyes. And I've never seen this look before. And he tried to get a cab and it didn't work, blah blah. So we went back to the venue we were at and got a cab in front of the venue because we had stepped off the property. And so they couldn't say no to us because we went to the venue. So we got in the cab, the door closed, the guy started driving, and he just laid into me. And he said, "You only asked me to get a cab because you thought they weren't picking us because you were black." And then he was like, "I didn't think you were one of those people, black people, this, that." And he just went off. And after the first sentence, I just burst into tears because he was my safety net. He was my protector. I He was supposed to be the one that whatever I say, this is what's going on, that this is what's going on, and he believes me. Um, and this wasn't even a racial case. My mind wasn't even on that, like I said. And he brought it up. And we had a long fight that night. And the next morning, once I sobered up, I'm thinking in my head, what have I done? I have to divorce this person that I just married 6 months ago, um, because he doesn't get it. And I don't have any support. And like I said earlier, this is such an important issue for me and obviously a very sensitive issue for me. I can't be in a relationship with somebody that isn't there for the journey, of understanding. And I was terrified and I built a wall, and that wall has only partially come down. 8 years later, I'm still doing a lot of work in therapy with that. And yeah, it was completely traumatic for me that moment because even if you're in a interracial relationship, it doesn't mean the person understands or wants to understand. And it's not that he didn't want to understand. The way he said to me was that the next day, he said, "I just don't want to think of you having to deal with that." And I couldn't articulate at that time my feelings and this and that, so I'm just like, then I won't tell you when I experience this kind of stuff. But that's the wrong thing to do. That's my partner in life. We're on this journey together. I'm sorry, boo boo, you're gonna suffer with me. That's literally the point, kind of the relationship, um, and so I regret being in that mindset. And so I've held a lot of things in. And doing that has distanced me from him, um, in a lot of ways. Um, we are fine now. There's no questions about it. But we definitely, in terms of the race conversation, there's definitely a long way to go. And one other example recently. Um, we've been doing some renovations, and he asked me to pick up some new cabinets that were made. Um, I do live in Georgia. Um, he asked me to pick up some cabinets in rural Georgia, and I'm like, "Are you sure you can't go with me?" Blah blah blah. It's like, no. He's like, I gotta get this done, this done. We had people at the house working. I'm like, okay, I had to work the next day, so I'm like, this is like the only chance I have, or he has, or we have to get these cabinets. So I said, fine. So I go out to his truck, and I'm like, well, I realized I didn't have the address. And he's like, oh, I think it's 6601 Jim Crow Road. And I looked at him and I said, excuse me? 6601 Jim Crow Road. And I said to him, you're joking. You're joking, right? It's like, no, what? Like it went clear over his head. Love him to death. It went clear over his head. The neighbor across the street was out. He is white. And I walked over to him. He's a good friend of ours. I walked over to him and I said, I need you to hear this right now. And my husband went with me across the street. I was like, he just asked me to drive to rural Georgia and pick up some cabinets on Jim Crow Road. And what I thought was going to click with my neighbor actually didn't. Um, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But I was clearly asking for help in this situation, in my opinion. And my neighbor realized after I spoke to him when I got back from Jim Crow Road. Um, I felt helpless. And my therapist asked me when I told him this story, he was like, did you feel you didn't have a choice? And I said, yes. I felt like I did not have a choice. And so I drove to Jim Crow Road in rural Georgia. And picked up these cabinets at this business at the corner of Jim Crow Road and Old Federal and drove home. Um, when I got home, I gave my husband a little piece of my mind so that I wouldn't break him. I said, you sent me into the lion's den. You have to understand that if I go to a place where those street names exist still, that means those ideals still exist with those people. So you sent a young black man alone to Jim Crow Road. Anything could have happened. And when I tell this story at work now, as an example. I'm like, you know, my phone did have spotty service out there. What if the car broke down and I couldn't get a hold of anybody? I couldn't get a hold of him. You expect me to rely on the neighbors, start knocking on doors? Are you kidding me? I know where that's going to lead. It's going to lead to me in the news.
I mean, wasn't Ahmaud Arbery in rural Georgia?
Ish. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I mean,
Not far from me. Yeah.
obviously we know that you can't just be like out um, living your life, just doing it just as a black person out in rural Georgia, especially if the signage is Jim Crow Road. I mean, I'm here in North Carolina. I could drive an hour and be at a sign that says "Home at the KKK," home of the KKK,
Mm-hmm.
and I can drive less than that and pass by the biggest flag in the state. It's a Confederate flag. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I hear you.
And I will say where I picked up these cabinets is the next town over from where the big hoo-ha the KKK is from. So I'll put that out there. So now I did get some good perspective from my white neighbor. My husband went to work. I went over to my neighbor's house. I said we need to talk. And I told him how I felt and how I was basically screaming for help. And he started crying. He was like, I just didn't see it that way. And I'm so, so sorry because he's like, if I thought you were in any immediate danger, I absolutely would have said something. And I understand that completely. But I have to think about the non-immediate danger as well. It's like I said, what if my car breaks down? What if I have zero phone service? What if this and that? What if I had to get gas? I go on you know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah, I
And
know what you mean, but I understand why. I understand why he didn't know what you mean because, like,
Mhm.
ultimately, they're living a different existence than us. They don't understand. They don't understand the cascade of consequences that can occur from someone having racist thoughts very easily from a society being steeped in racism for generations. They don't understand that there's all this latent power out there, that all it takes is a spark,
Mhm.
and then a cascade of events can occur that can literally lead you to your untimely death. And I think a lot of people just don't want to believe that, right? Because there's this whole American ideal of meritocracy and of like freedom and liberty and life
Mhm.
and liberty and the pursuit of happiness. And if you believe that such a thing exists in that country, in the environment, just like latent, lying dormant, waiting to be activated by any racialized person who feels like they want to activate it, um, that is a uh, it's a very difficult thing to accept, even if you're not experiencing it, right? Because especially if your worldview is tied up in an illusion that you've been kind of force fed throughout the course of your entire life, that is much nicer and much more pleasant to think about than the reality. Um, it's a tough world out there. It's a tough world
Mhm.
out there. Your story about relationships reminds me of some of mine. I'm going to tell you two. So, story number one. I was dating this guy. He was my first boyfriend, actually. I was in college and undergrad. And, you know, it didn't work out between us, but we remained friends. Okay. I was friends with his family. We became close. Um, you could probably track him down if you want. I'm cool with it if you guys do. He actually, if you're familiar with RuPaul's Drag Race, Pandora Box from season one and from um, whatever the like All Stars or whatever it was. Yeah, like he was dating me, and then we broke up, and then shortly thereafter, he got into a relationship with Pandora Box, and they've been in a relationship ever since. So, yes, there's a whole story there that we'll leave out for now. But the actual story that actually relates to our conversation is that his family built a sauna at a lake house, and I was there with them vacationing. And he was gone, and I was just in the sauna with his parents. And he's racialized white. His parents are white, and we just start talking about being gay, their acceptance of their son being gay, stuff like that. And she was like, "Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, it was so difficult for us." And they said, I mean, think about it. At first, he was dating a black guy, and now a drag queen.
Mm.
So I'm sitting there, mostly naked in a sauna with his parents, and they're like, "Oh my gosh! I mean, he's dating black people and then a drag queen." Like, so it was just like that they put those on the same kind of level was
Mhm.
very, very shocking and interesting to me. Yeah, so I struggled a lot in my relationships. I was in a lot of relationships with racialized white people because, same as you, I was in a world where I was surrounded by mostly racialized white people. Because I was in AP classes, because I was in honors classes, because I was doing, even when I did sports, like group sports, I wasn't really around black people. I didn't really play basketball or football. My parents wouldn't let me play them, thought football was too dangerous. And then basketball, I was a good shooter, but the ball handling wasn't there, and I didn't really have a trainer, so that didn't really take off. But I was a good swimmer, but swimming is extremely white, and I was a decent gymnast, and gymnastics is extremely white, and so those are the things that I did. And then I was playing violin, extremely white.
Mhm.
I played jazz trumpet, and that's where I got to interact with some black people, but mostly it was just all about the music. We never really got to talk about our experiences or anything like that. So it was a very similar experience for me, and it kind of translated to my relationships. I dated a lot of racialized white people, and I kept experiencing, the same things that you were kind of talking about is these realizations would arise, and not just in my romantic relationships, but also in my friendships, where my friends would reveal that they didn't really understand my life experience, like like at all, you know, and that can be a really devastating realization because you really care about these people and they really care about you, but it makes you question, like, do they really care about you? Because they don't really know you, right? They don't really know the life you're living, the things that matter so much to you, the things that are influencing your life so much. Um, so it can really get in the way of close relationships. Um, I recommend for anyone in that situation, you got to communicate. It's the only way, it's the best way. And it'll clear things up and it may hurt, but you got to do it. But anyways, I want to say one more thing before you continue. So that was kind of the history of like mistakes. But I would be remiss if I did not talk about the present because I am currently in a partnership with a racialized white man. Okay, I know you would think I would learn my lesson, but here I am. Okay, but really, this is a totally different experience because he's incredibly perceptive and he cares about me a lot, enough to overcome his own fears in investigating this problem, and he has his own independent interests of this problem separate from me that he's been working on and thinking about before we even got together. And I think that was the key. There was something within him already internally that he was going to be an anti-racist, that he was going to fight against white supremacy. He already was there when we met. Now he's much farther along since we've been together because he's never dated a black person before, and he's never dated a black person in America before, and he's French, a French national, so he is experiencing, from being this close in proximity to me and in life to me, he continues to be shocked, even though he understands the nature of what racism is and white supremacy is and how it acts on people. He still is shocked every single time something happens because of just it's irrational. It's devastating, and it has severe impacts, and it's oftentimes for literally no reason, And so yeah, that's the life that we're living, and it makes such a huge difference to have someone in the relationship who's willing to talk to you about it, who's willing to support you in it, who's willing to listen, who's willing um, to try to understand, who wants to understand. Just having that mindset, being with someone who has that mindset, it's been game changing for me personally. So that when these events happen, even events that could cost me 5, 6 figures, in money that I could earn, I'm able to, move forward. I'm able to not let it devastate me and send me into a deep depression or, make me feel like, hopeless. So just want to put that out there. It's worth having the conversation to get to that point because it is possible to get to that point from where you started out.
Absolutely. And for me in my relationship, I've the one thing I've been working on doing is writing a letter to my husband, and it hasn't happened yet. It's the ideas are sitting in my head, and we're in a good place right now, and I'm like, do I really want to ruffle what's going on right now? Because there's other stuff going on, there's other important things going on in our life right now. But when that time does come, this is definitely going to be a topic of conversation. Um, and it's not going to be easy. And I'm going to tell them that, like you chose me, you know, and so you have to. You chose me. You chose all of me. So you have to deal with that, if that's your choice, and vice versa.